Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashish Kaushal. I'm the CEO of Hire Talent, a diversity staffing firm, and Consciously Unbiased, a community that's helping change the world to make the world a better place. So this is our fifth segment in this series on the future of contingent workforce. I'm really excited today. We made some predictions, big predictions in past broadcasts. We moved from talking about COVID's impact on the golden age of contingent to where we are today. And folks, I think that we are in the early innings of the golden age of contingent. So we'll talk more about that today. Now, here we are in 2023. We're heading into what most economists are saying will be a recession. Here's how the economic downturn could impact the contingent workforce. The Fed is trying to control inflation with the fastest rate hiking cycle in history, and the economy has held up well so far. The policymakers just pumped 1.7 trillion into the economy, which is inflationary and at odds with the Fed. Historically, the average on 5%. Manufacturing is in contraction, but the services sector seems to be booming. The demographics on the labor force are in decline with 2 million people retiring. We have not brought back up the H-1Bs to levels it was in 2017. So that's reduced the available workforce by additional 2 million people. There's 10.4 million open jobs and 5.7 million available workers. So if the Fed pushes the unemployment rate back up to 5% with the policies, we would still have a 1.7 million worker shortage. Just check out the JOLT report, which we'll put the link in below. Inflation across the board is going lower. Gas prices are lower than a year ago. Purchasers to manufacturers are lower, and real estate equivalent rent prices are going to sink. But I'm not sure wages will. And so that's more of what we're going to talk about today. And so to cap it off, there's a movement to bring back manufacturing locally, which is going to put even more pressure on wages. So at the very least, I would say 2023 is going to be complicated. We have an amazing group of panelists, guests today to talk about contingent workforce trends here in 2023. We have Karen Selfer. She's the global head of consumer products, life sciences for Pontoon Solutions. Jennifer Torney, global VP, client experiences and partnerships, Tapfin Talent Solutions. Tammy Browning, SVP and president of Kelly OCG. Bruce Morton, head of strategy at Legis Global Solutions. Doug Levy, CEO of Beeline. Brian Solkowski, COO of Guiding Global, and Jason Israti, CEO of Brightfield. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's always fun to have this group together. Can we start off, I can't do justice on who you guys are, and I know you really don't need an introduction because everyone knows you at this point. But I would love for you to talk about what you do and what you think the biggest trend in contingent labor is going to be in 2023. Should we start? Karen, do you want to start?
Sure, happy to start. So Corinne Southforce, as you can see, I'm at Pontoon. I'm a global segment head at Pontoon, part of the executive leadership team and responsible for global clients in consumer products, life sciences, and industrials. Honestly, I think it's really hard to pin down one big trend in 2023 in the contingent labor workforce. I believe there is a continuation going to happen in 23 of much of what we've seen in 22. Flexibility is here to stay. To have a workforce and to offer a work environment with hybrid work, to be an employer of choice, is going to remain one of the key trends. Talent shortage is going to remain here, as you've just also mentioned in your opening comments. Wage inflation will likely remain around 5 to 6%. So the competition for talent is here to stay. Even if we had, and we probably already are in a recession, even if we are in a recession, I do not believe that companies will lay off workers en masse, because we all know how difficult it is to rehire or to attract the right talent in the market that we're in. So to me, I see a continuation of a fierce war for talent, a lot of upskilling and reskilling needed, a lot of innovation needed on behalf of the employers to attract the right talent at the right time.
Absolutely. These are all great points. Jason?
Thank you. Good to be back. Good to have some new faces here. And thank you, Brian, for playing some guitar. Hopefully we'll get you back. My name is Jason Israti. I'm one of the founders of Brightfield, and I'm also on the team that architects TDX, Talent Data Exchange, where we look at market trends specific to the extended workforce. I think in 23, we will see continued uncertainty be the main driver. We tend to think about it through the lens in our space of what's happening in our industry, but the buyers that we work with and work for, they also have their own companies that are going through their own challenges. And so trying to get a sense of where is demand coming from and how to serve that talent is harder and more volatile than ever. I agree that wages will likely continue to come up, and I agree that there's an intense pressure on talent because I'm not sure that the resignation pressures have eased up as much as we'd like to think.
Absolutely. And Doug?
Hey everybody, Doug Levy, CEO of Beeline, going on my 22nd year. And little known fact, I'm also an original founder of Brightfield, but Jason never gives me credit for that. And that's cool. My prediction, I agree with both my colleagues just said wholeheartedly. My prediction is much more pedestrian. I think because of the uncertainty around the economy, et cetera, this is going to be the year finally when the enterprise is going to say, I've got to get a handle on who's actually working for me. There are just so many pockets that are not captured. Not only, from a VMS perspective, but just outside of that as well. And so we could talk about total talent and unified workforce, and I think we're closer. But I think this is going to be the year where the C-suite is going to say, listen, I've got to get that magic button pushed to understand who's working where, at what cost, et cetera, to start to understand risk. And then I do think that'll be maybe a first step or the precipice towards the unified workforce. But I'm starting to see from the marketplace, the evidence we're getting is like, I've just got to see what I'm dealing with, classify it properly, and then I can start making decisions as I move into this potential downturn.
Absolutely. Those are great points. You're playing it safe though, too. Brian, welcome back. This is your 5th one. And I think as you promised, you're going to play a little bit guitar.
5 Timers Club, right? 5 Timers Club.
So we're all excited about the guitar part of this.
I just hung it back up. You got to hear
did.
that earlier.
You got to bring it back.
I'll close out with it.
Okay,
right?
perfect.
All right. So again, Brian Solkowski, COO at Guiding Global. And Doug, for what's worth, I very much agree in terms of that total visibility and the uncertainty being the prompt to that action. It's interesting, though. I have a little bit different outlook as it relates to the economy this year than we've heard so far. I read an article just recently that referred to it right now as the split screen economy. And I think that's a really good analogy because we're seeing indications where services sector pulled back temporary recruitment in the latest report, just pulled back. But the jobs market, to everyone's point, has remained incredibly durable to this point, right? Unemployment, 3.5%, continuing to see wage gains and growth. My prediction, and I hate to say it, is that split screen economy starts to merge onto a single screen. Doesn't mean, given the pressures that are out there, that all of a sudden there's a complete reversal, but that we will see continued slowdown in wage gains and some easing of that imbalance between supply and demand in the talent market right now.
Interesting. So you think it's going to be more of like a rolling recession on some level that eventually converges?
I like the way you said that. Yes.
Jen, welcome.
Hi,
Jen?
thank you. Okay. Nice to be with such esteemed colleagues.
Very excited.
So I'll introduce myself. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Jen Torney. Thank you. Jen Torney. I am the Vice President of Client Experience and Partnerships. I look after all of our clients globally. And also our partnership. So I get the pleasure of working with Doug, your team at Beeline quite a bit, and some others. Okay. But I actually didn't have the pleasure of joining you guys in the last iterations of this. Upset about that. That's okay. We'll talk about that another time. But I think if I had made a prediction, I would have actually thought that COVID vaccine mandates would have had more impact this year. And we're starting to see those be sort of something in the background. And it's funny, I was just in London yesterday, actually, and I was visiting with a client and nobody asked to see your vaccine cards. Nobody cares if, nobody's doing temperature checks. It's interesting because I think last year we all thought that was going to be with us to stay. And we were thinking about what do we need to do to have some sort of passport to be able to include all of that background information around our health status. It's interesting to see how quickly things change. So, but what I would say, I mean, if there was one thing that I think, and this is very macro, but I think for this coming year, with low unemployment, with the looming sort of economic pressure we're seeing, with price pressure, but it's confusing because people are still hiring like crazy, but also we're seeing layoffs. Very, very gray, right? But at the end of the day, there's still a big talent mismatch out there. I think everything from upskilling and employee engagement and attraction, filtering into all categories of talent, not just full-time employment talent. I think that's going to be the order of the day. And so we're going to see organizations really focused on meaningful work, belonging, which definitely filters into the cause of consciously unbiased, right, Ash? But I also think that we're going to see, even with direct sourcing, a lot of focused on outcome-based engagement. People are buying for the outcome now. They're buying for, get me the people that can do X, Y, and Z. I don't care how, get right to the source. And so I think there's gonna be a lot more focus on what it looks like to build outcome-based solutions. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth, 2.5 cents.
Love it. I think this is a great point, especially when layoffs are happening, but the demand is still there. We definitely have to invest in sort of retraining and upskilling. That's definitely gonna be a priority, I think, this year. Bruce, my friend, what are your thoughts? Welcome.
Hey, Ash. Great to be here. So Bruce Morton, Head of Strategy. So my job is actually to try and predict what's coming down the pipe. So I'll double down on a couple of things. The one is the visibility that Doug mentioned. The analogy I use is if you went, large organization, they go to the head of real estate and say, hey, can you pop into the office tomorrow with a report on all of our real estate we have around the world? Do we lease it? Do we own it? How long are we committed to? What's the utilization? You'd get the report in a day. You ask somebody to do that for how you're getting work done, you ain't going to see that the next day. So I think visibility will absolutely become more and more important as organizations start to truly rethink the way they get work done and understand better how they're getting work done, which will tie into the point Jen made, which I wholeheartedly agree with. We are definitely moving more and more into an outcome-based industry. And I think, we see that within the staffing firms around the world, getting into that space. And a lot of that is sort of a bit of a halfway house and, staffing with a bow, as it's called. That's not going to be the future. Organizations are going to have to commit, take the risk, and get paid on the outcome. Can't have it both ways. So I think we're going to see that part of the extended workforce grow exponentially.
Definitely. Those are great points as well. For many of you guys, this has been our 5th one. And Doug, in my experience, you're 99% right most of the time, with 1% error. And so given your predictions last year, what's one thing you got right and what's one thing you got wrong?
Well, I told you not to pick on me because I don't remember what I even predicted last year. And I guarantee it wasn't 99% right. So I don't know. I'm going to defer. I don't get paid like Bruce does, those kind of dollars to make predictions. I'm trying to run a business here, Ash. Move on to someone else.
Jason, do you want to take it on?
Yeah, I didn't think that we would end with the kind of inflation and then all the uncertainty that followed and the volatility that followed the idea of having 7-point-something% inflation versus 1-point-something% inflation, which was predicted. I think that's the difference. People were not expecting that. So I assume that we would have some sort of gradual, stable growth out of things where people was that war for talent. Yes, we have to be fiscally responsible, but it wasn't about like savings like it is now. So right now we're hearing hard savings, faster is better, is something that I wasn't anticipating to be this much of a rally cry at this point.
Yeah.
That's what I got wrong.
Everything else you got right?
The other 99.9%. Fortunately for me, yeah, I got it.
He mixed us up.
What was the 1% you got right?
That rate cards would be a winning feature. So we built automation around that.
Bruce, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that I was overly optimistic how organizations would embrace the concept of work anywhere. It's happened domestically, and I think managers are very, very comfortable with putting work in Nashville instead of the Bay Area, for example. But there's still a hesitancy or a hiding behind some legal compliance to actually put more and more work offshore. As individuals, finding individuals out of country to give that work to. I think people are still hiding behind the compliance flag on that. And it hasn't been embraced as much as I think it needs to be. So I was a bit over optimistic on that. But domestically, I think we're all talking about work anywhere would become just the norm, and I think it has. So
True.
That was my good and bad.
Yeah. And Brian?
Yeah, you can tell we didn't coordinate up front because I was going to go with a very similar one to Bruce, which is that remote work is here to stay. Although I do like the nuance, Bruce, that there's a difference between within borders and any borders, and I think that's a very true statement. But I look at it with all the broad announcements, we're back to office, we're bringing our folks back to work. How many of those have actually been followed through on versus an unending series of date changes where it keeps getting pushed back or softened as employees revolt? And that's really been crystal clear just how much power in the current environment they have and how much that has shaped that policy. So it is here to stay, and organizations have hired people where they lie for the last 3 years. That's not going to change now. As it relates to what we got wrong, or what I got wrong specifically. Hard for me to even say that, but the great quit, great resignation, and how sustained that has proven to be has been certainly eye opening. When we met early last year, it was very much an emerging phenomenon, and the fact that we're out here 12 months later or close to it, and still seeing high evidence of quit rates, high attrition, and stats that suggest a significant portion of the workforce is either looking or open to look, has been surprising that it's that sustained.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Do you think that's going to maintain in this economy?
Well, it goes back to my previous comment in terms about the split screen and them merging onto one. I do believe that there will be a softening on that. Hopefully I don't get it wrong again.
Karen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to call us all out. I think, and someone said it, I think you, Jason, I think we underestimated simply the magnitude of a lot of maybe what we predicted. So I don't think we predicted just quite the amount of wage inflation that we've seen, which was unbelievable. I don't know how many times, I've had to sign increased salaries. I think also the magnitude of attrition, right? Like, so all that, or even if we look back, since the pandemic, the last 2 years, really for our industry were record years. Did we anticipate that to that extent to continue into 22? I doubt that. So it's a really interesting time that we're in to see how the uncertainty that has, I would say surfaced in 22 with the war in the Ukraine also, and recession, etc., how that plays out now. But that would be my key. Where we went wrong is in the magnitude of what we predicted.
Yeah, no, definitely. Those are great points. And so for 2023, where do you think we're going at this point?
Are you asking me or in general?
Yeah, and
Let's start with you.
What?
In terms of trends and stuff, like what do you think 2023 is going to look like? I mean, I can tell you, I'll start off with one that I think is happening. I noticed at CWS this year that if you look at the last 10 years, we kind of went into this transactional standpoint, right? Where they're asking all the vendors and clients, the clients are asking vendors to really go with the status quo and let's just look at price and let's look at how we're implementing things from a transactional basis. And then COVID came about and we had all these distributed workforces and different ways of working and all these apps and tech coming out and reporting that's needed. And so I feel like clients are now asking to bring back the strategic part of it and be more transformational than transactional. And that's what I feel like they're asking all you guys. Do you feel that has shifted a little bit more and come more front and center?
I'll go first, Ashish. I would say it's never been one or the other. It's always been both. Now, what gets center stage shifts over time and ebbs and flows depending on what's happening, both with their enterprise and in the larger marketplace. But when you talk about the operations, the transaction management, that's always been there. And frankly, if you're not executing well on that front, you don't even have the opportunity to talk about strategy and long-term engagement. So it's a fundamental component of what we do. Now, when that's operating well, it certainly opens the door, gives us a window, a channel to do bigger and more inventive type things. And so as we go through these ebbs and flows, I do think, yes, that what's taking center stage is we've built processes, we've built Doug, Jason team built the tech that allow for some really high quality process and operational management, and that's opening the opportunity and placing center stage overall workforce strategy and how the external workforce is a fundamental and critical part of that overarching strategy.
Absolutely.
I'll add to that. If
Brian,
jump in.
I have to interject because I could not agree with you more. I think if there was one positive, and you can't really say positive out of the COVID pandemic, but if there was one positive that we all came away with, was I think every organization recognized the importance of understanding their contingent labor population, and that there's people in there. There's actual people that are doing that work. And I think that we, as a global community, started to acknowledge that and did a couple of things. I think number one, it started having us all pay more attention to how we treat the contingent workforce. But it also allowed for us in the services business to get our arms around visibility. I think a lot of us have said the visibility is so critical, but COVID really shined that flashlight at the fact that there was not enough visibility of that population. And so now we're seeing a lot more acceleration of solutions like SOW to help forward that, not just in visibility, but in optimizing that category and optimizing how they're leveraging different types of alternative workforce solutions, et cetera. And so to me, I think those are all really good things. I mean, if we were to have said a couple of years ago that we thought total talent management, the wave of the future, a lot of it is just getting hung up on that definition of what TTM really means, total talent workforce, total talent management, total talent acquisition. At the end of the day, we are moving there, folks. I mean, think about it. All of our clients those of you like my colleagues on the phone today, all of our clients have expanded. All of our clients have moved into different categories. Do they have every talent strategy inside of a solution? And I think we are in that direction in some way, shape, or form, perhaps a little bit more gray and nebulous. But that's an interesting, slow roll of a change.
Yeah, no, I love that you're humanizing contingent labor, because really at the end of the day, work is work, right? It doesn't matter how you're getting paid.
Yeah.
Bruce, you're adding to that?
Yeah, and of course, I'll wholeheartedly agree. As with the book I've written recently, Universal Workforce Model, is all about that. And I don't like the total talent names either, Jen. So we're trying to redefine it as universal workforce. But anyway, I was going to say that I think for 2023.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Where's my copy?
Thanks, Jason.
Not just Jason. Not just Jason.
Oh, thank you, Doug.
Doug works here too.
Yeah. But I think for 2023, I think we are going to, as an industry, we need to be understanding the human and technology, superhumans, by helping those people what they can do with technology. A lot of conversations about, is it tech or is it a person? The conversation should be about what can we do when those two things are combined. And obviously, like a chat GPT, which Jason was saying, it's been around for years, but it hasn't been consumerized before. Now Joe Blows like me can go in there and ask it crazy questions and just get blown away by its ability. It isn't new tech, but it's new the way that we can interact with it. So as we think about that, I think part of our solutions going forward, it's no longer good enough to be just a phenomenal service provider. We've got to truly understand the tech as well, and we have to become tech and service companies. And I think that tech companies have to have services, service companies have to have tech. So we're seeing this, last year there were 151 deals done in this space about M&A, and most of those were staffing companies buying tech and tech buying staffing. So we are seeing this, I think, this evolution of the expansion of our services from either side of that. Coin.
I think I'd weigh in though. I agree. I like that term, Jen, slow roll, because every year we sit here and we talk about the trends of the future, and we talked about this a bit last year. If we're really honest with ourselves, it's a relatively lethargic industry we're in. Like we've got these great plans that we want to do, but the folks that we work with haven't necessarily been able to move the ball forward as quickly as we'd like. And so there are so many no-brainers out there. And I'm sorry, but like TDX is a no-brainer. It just is. Direct sourcing is a no-brainer. There's so many no-brainers that still are not progressing at the extent that we would articulate, especially if you look at this from a talent strategy. So I remain, I guess, always somewhat frustrated with the notion that we've got these great ideas, we've got these amazing solutions. We know what the path to a talent strategy is over 5-7 years, but yet we're still patting ourselves on the back because I got an upsell on SOW. And that's important. But the reality is we are a slow industry to react. And I think there's a lot that's available to our clients that I'm not going to sit here and tell you, I think this is going to be 2023 the year where they move in that direction. It's still a slow slog. And I talked to a large client yesterday who said, look, man, I totally get it, but you have to understand our business changed materially from COVID. It went down and then it went crazy. And for me to even get share of mind to talk about this is a major issue. Or I've got a massive SAP implementation or Workday, and I really want to do that, but it's going to take the back burner. So I love where we're going, but I think realistically, it's much, much slower than any of us thought it would be.
Those are great points too.
Yeah. I think there's maybe pointed examples that are optimistic to the contrary a little bit. I see more companies that are taking the workforce transformation concepts that they were already starting to think about. And then I assume that these things would start to slow down as people are looking for savings. And it actually sped up with the key companies that we're talking with around these concepts. And I think there's a realization that total talent management has always been happening. It's just been happening poorly. But they manage these types of talent. They just don't do it in a coordinated, intelligent way. And so the idea that, that now is that time with at least 10 different organizations right now that are succeeding in now is the time to execute across workforce transformation. And I guess my optimism is buoyed by they're forming the exec teams, they're real execs, they have real mandates, and they're getting budget. So I think 2023, if not the year that it's maybe not a landslide of activity, but I think an important year of inflection toward those key turning points of data-driven workforce transformation.
And I want to add to that, Jason, that actually really echoes with me and what's been said. But I really see, so I think that companies, because of this shortage of talent, because of the high attrition, because of the dollars they've had to invest to attract talent, have had to pivot and make that their top priority, right? At the C-level, at the boards. And I think that actually puts us in this industry in a really good position to maybe accelerate somewhat what Doug says. We've been moving really slowly, I agree. But I think we are in a really good position to help accelerate the workforce transformation, right? Totally agree. If I look at our clients, what they want from us is to be a strategic partner and to really actually consolidate so that they don't have to talk to 7 different providers and tech companies and whatever have you. They want one strategic partner that understands their business, their needs, their pain points, and can bring it together from a workforce strategy perspective. We have to evolve in that direction too, as providers, I believe. But I'm actually really optimistic, as you, Jason, and probably many here, that we can really move the needle. We're in a good spot. And I think companies recognize the need to transform their workforce.
Yeah, I think having that flexibility, Karen, I think is absolutely key, right? I mean, I think we've got to.
Yes.
I mean, we closed the deal. We closed the deal in December, which was not an existing client. And they bought off us the automation of their onboarding through a bot. And if somebody told me a couple of years ago that we would be selling a bot to get some work done for a non-client, I'd have been like, you're crazy. But that's where we're at now. So I think it is about us being more flexible.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say I think there's also, this is a year probably where you're actually going to see the HR departments work closely with procurement. And so if those two things converge, then you're going to see the need for tracking more data, and you're going to see more planning around the total workforce rather than just individuals. So I do definitely see that. And I think, I mean, even the functionality that you guys are bringing with Beeline, with training, tracking, and the data from a micro level, I think is really powerful now. And I think the job catalogs are starting to converge across different categories as well. And so if you have the same job description across temp and full-time, then you can start doing some magic with it. So given that, where do you think AI is going to impact? I mean, I can tell you my recruiters have been playing with ChatGPT, and they're scared that their jobs are going to be replaced because it literally can write a summary better than my recruiters can, and it can create searches and find candidates and stuff like that. And so it's a dynamic tool, but it doesn't mean their roles are going to change. It just means they're going to have more higher level roles to work on, in my perspective. But where are you guys seeing sort of AI falling into 2023?
I think that you just said something really important, which is that their roles don't get eliminated; they change, right? So to the extent that routine, mundane, or even as you talk about like a ChatGPT, some more advanced tasks can be delivered with quality through automation regularly. That's actually a huge opportunity for all of us. And if we think about the value that's placed on our services, it's not equal. Those things that are going back to the transactional versus strategic question that we just talked about a short time ago, the transactional is priced at a discount relative to the strategic. So to the extent that we can derive more and more through automation in the fulfillment process, we think about in hiring, whether it's contingent, full-time, et cetera, the amount of recurring tasks that need to happen with every onboard, offboard, et cetera, they're ripe for automation. And to the extent that we can bring that in, it allows those individuals, those high performers on your team, to move upstream. It allows us to sell upstream and get a greater return on our services. So to me, it's all about opportunity. There's a ton of optimism for it. It's a change to embrace rather than to fight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say, Ash, if
that starts to really underscore the.
No, Jen, go ahead.
I think there's a delay, so I keep starting to talk. I apologize, Jason. You go.
No.
Go
Not
for
your
it,
fault
Jason.
to drop packets.
Stay down the facts. No, I have a delay.
No, please. First time is
I'll
first.
just say really quickly
timers,
then. So, yeah. I was just going to say, kind of to echo Brian's comments, I think it allows for us to go back to putting the effort and energy and the resources into cultivating relationships with the talent instead of the effort that is required in matching to job descriptions, et cetera. So it sort of revitalizing truly are being, all paid for, which is connecting and truly connecting with the people, understanding what they want to do next, being better about redeployment because we understand where they want to go, and let the AI do the boring heavy lift. I think that's really exciting.
Yep.
No, absolutely.
I completely agree. And to Bruce's point earlier, the transformer technology that underlies GPT has been around for 5 years. So in AI terms, that's old, I guess, or in modern AI terms, because otherwise we go back to the 1980s. But what that's doing is humanizing a lot of the AI interaction, especially through chat, making things feel more human-generated, human-readable. And then the rest of what's happening with transformer technology is what I think, we've been building toward impacting the space all of this time. So what's a rec worth working on? What's a potential match? What is this worth? How long will it take? What's wrong with this contract? Or, so being able to leverage the underlying technologies that GPT is originally built on, I think those things are starting to come to bear in something that's more usable, and something that instead of just working with those that are in the back office doing the planning and the forecasting, but to actually show up in the transaction as an active analytic that influences a person and understands that person. Those are things that we're currently working with Beeline to bring to customers in the now. So I think, those are exciting pieces that are coming to market right now.
Yeah, and Jason, what came to my head when you just said that was, it's basically like GPT is basically doing with AI what the browser did to the internet for businesses, right? It's giving us a new medium to sort of transform and change the way we work.
You know what else is doing? And Jason, I love what you just said. I mean, we collectively have a responsibility to help define AI and what that actually means and what the ramifications could be. Because I look at GPT, that wasn't even in my lexicon 2 weeks ago, and probably the same for most of the people you're dealing with. And let's say the same thing about blockchain a couple of years ago, right? So the challenge I have is that there's those out there that want to sprinkle words such as AI driven or GPT. Like, what does that even mean? And it's incredibly disingenuous. So I get really nervous on this topic because when you ask the role of it, the biggest role is dishonest marketing in my mind. I'm just being honest with you. I think the opportunity is for us to talk about how judicious we should be, how circumspect we should be, and think about the ramifications. And that's why I love the way you posed it, Jason. I think, like, will it help with matching? Sure. And I use this analogy all the time. If I found myself in a situation where I was going to go to Match.com, I think that would be really helpful, taking the universe from here to here. But there's no way I'm making a marriage proposal to somebody because an algorithm said I should, right? And to me, that's an appropriate analogy. Like, we still need to utilize our own heart and brains and everything as the recruiters are doing. So I think things change, but I don't think, you wake up someday and you hit the button and the AI guru said, here's exactly who you hire, when you hire, how much, et cetera. And I think people are maybe pitching that in a way that's dangerous.
Yeah, Ash, the folks that work for you aren't summarizers; they're recruiters, and there are elements of their job that should be completely automated as we get there, and hopefully that enables them to leverage the types of things they do best. The analogy I've always given in this discussion is, when the robots came to my wife's lab, I said, "Are you threatened that they're taking their job?" Your job. She said, "No, now I get to finally be a scientist and not a pipetter." So that's exactly, what this is. Let us do the jobs we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, my team is excited about it because they're like, they get rid of all the things that they don't like doing, and they can actually focus on the relationship building with candidates, and so it's kind of helping with that part.
I just want to know if Doug's wife knows he's on Match.com.
He does now.
He's doing market research.
I said, if I found myself in a position, which I don't. Run the tape.
All right. So the next question is, do you feel like there's a shift from vendor neutrality to strategic suppliers? And is that going to continue this year?
I think vendor neutrality is the dumbest thing I've heard in literally 15 years. And I get why we all used it 20 years ago. To me, it's such not a thing. And the data that TDX provides and the data that you all house, the compliance and the governance is there. So at least in my world, it's find the best provider and keep utilizing that provider over and over again until I have a reason not to. And I don't care if it's one company or 20 companies. So I just think it's a falsehood at this point.
Well, I would can't believe I'm disagreeing.
Doc, and I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, I was going to disagree with Doug only in the fact that it does exist still. And we'll see tenders out there that are explicit in their request for vendor neutral. So it still exists, but that percentage is falling, and it's falling precipitously. Where I completely agree with you, Doug, is it's about producing outcomes. The condition of satisfaction isn't vendor neutral. The condition of satisfaction is the best candidate, the best time at the best price, who's the best fit for the organization. So there may be scenarios where an open competition produces that best result, and there's many other scenarios, and we've seen these, where close, very strategic partnering, demand planning and forecasting produce much better results. So it's really about understanding your requirements, digging deep to understand the frequency, the specifications, the level of detail that's necessary on those requirements to then select a strategy, sourcing strategy that produces the best results. So vendor neutral for the sake of vendor neutral is a waste of time. Competition can breed great results. So can select, focus, It's our job to get to that bottom and make those recommendations.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I would just to hit Brian's point, in TDX, we don't have a metric called neutrality. We have a metric called competitiveness. And that's what matters. And if you look at where this industry started, where there were large suppliers that were sometimes taking advantage of situations, and so the need for vendor neutrality and that term came about from that. I think we're decades after that point, and
it was a reaction to an abuse, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think the VMS has kind of
Yeah.
removed the steak dinners and the variable
Oh.
rate charges that we're having, right? And
Steak
so-
is okay. You don't have to take all the meals away.
Yeah, we have a steak dinner functionality in
I
Beeline.
accept
Please
wine.
don't say that.
Yeah, there's certain things we don't have. Take it easy over there.
I mean, I'm gonna say that again. Like,
I will say,
think
though-
the skill shortage means that we have to all be creative. Vendor neutrality is not creative to find the best people, right? And so it's really about find me the best talent, not work with I don't know X amount of vendors and give them equal requisition. So that skill shortage again. In my opinion, makes that vendor neutrality more and more not a topic.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And Jen, you were saying?
Yes to everything that you guys have said. I have to say, like, yes to everything, right? But I would also say, too, the obvious, which is if the market's saying we want direct sourcing, if the market is saying we want outcome-based solutions, but we want somebody in place to be our primary supplier to connect talent, that's not neutral by definition. So
Right.
the market is sort of veering off that path. I think sometimes people use the concept, two words, vendor neutrality, just because they are kind of familiar with that being associated with SP with multiple supply channels. But the whole concept of true vendor neutrality business, there's no way you can connect the right to.
I think Bruce said it best. It's not even for me so much about neutrality. It's just keep abuse out of the system, right? It was really about not providing unfair advantage to one over another. And we've got the data and we've got the workflows, et cetera, to accommodate that. So that's why I feel it's somewhat antiquated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Bruce, you have any thoughts?
No, I think it's all been said.
Okay. What are your thoughts on direct sourcing, and what is direct sourcing in your definition?
Another abused marketing term. Sorry, Doug.
It's interesting. We've just we've got some masterclasses we're running around the country, and we ran one in London a few weeks ago, and we came together with competitors and some tech partners because we're all getting frustrated with the confusion out there. So we're just trying to put a stake in the ground of this is what direct sourcing looks like. Here's the best in class. Basically, it's using an organization's brand to attract contingent talent. I mean, that's the bottom line. So I think that where it went wrong, why it hasn't been taken up as been as successful as it could have been, is it's a massive change management program. Each hiring manager, and they know where they want to go to for their staff. They might have pre-ID'd, position might even be open. So as you look at the actual available opportunities where you can point direct sourcing at, you've got to be incredibly strategic about that and ring fence certain positions that suit that highly repeatable skills. You can talent pool and hire them quickly. If you go in there and try and just change behaviors by putting a 48-hour exclusivity, that's not going to work. If I'm a hiring manager, I'm just going to sit on that for 48 hours and then send the rec to my buddy down the road. Why wouldn't you? So I think that there's been a few bumps in the road, but I think the industry now is starting to get a handle on it. I think organizations are starting to take the advice on how to set it up from a change management perspective. And Doug, a couple of the big clients that we share, I think that was really important for that. It was the design of it. So there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a great concept, but I do think that the tech partners, players were probably saying, build it and they will come. That didn't happen. So I think that caused some of the confusion as well. But I'll get off my soapbox.
I love it. I mean, those are great points, because I got confused because when I went to CWS last year, every vendor was doing direct sourcing, and I was like, whoa, that's basically staffing. So it just sounds like it's a discounted master service agreement. We charge less for the same thing that we used to do, right? Basically. Jen, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you think about just boiling it down, direct sourcing circumvents any sort of traditional supply. It's direct to the talent, right? So that can be defined in a number of different ways. And, we've all learned by attending gig economy sessions at SIA, it can look a lot of different ways and how you architect what that looks like. But I think at the end of the day, the market is looking to get the hire as fast as possible, circumvent any of the slowdown. But again, it all depends. Direct sourcing look different depending on what technology you use, depending on how you leverage curation. Do you use an automated curation agent? Do you use people? Do you use internal talent for that? And I think a lot of that, there's so many different definitions of it, but I do believe that we'll probably start to see various iterations of those types of solutions in the same organization, sort of different use case based, as we evolve the next couple of years. I think a lot of it is still getting proved out and what works well in certain circumstances.
Yeah,
it's really interesting when you think that this was an extension of an MSP program. I don't know why it wasn't an extension of an RPO program. It sort of makes more sense with that extension, and we'd be in a different place.
Right.
But
Yeah,
it's weird.
Right.
We can't go backwards, but
brilliant thought.
Yeah.
I love that.
but Bruce, isn't it really
It's
just
all,
a better
it's all the
technology?
same nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
And isn't it just
And
a better
contingent
technology
labor,
enabler?
really, right?
What, Jason?
And isn't it a better technology-enabled version of what folks were doing in London 15 years ago anyway? And we were saying, oh, they'll finally catch up to the Americans, but we said, no, like they're doing it all. It was RPO, MSP, direct recruiting, like they got the job done. And so here we are saying, here's a spin on it. So when we were saying we were 6 years ahead of the UK, I was feeling pretty sure that it was the other way around. So.
What's changed in terms of metrics and tracking in the contingent workforce?
Well, I'll get us kicked off. I think the biggest thing, and we have touched on this before, but when we talk about total workforce and truly getting an understanding, the push to understand from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, the contingent workforce as a function of the total workforce has really taken root. So whereas a lot of companies came out with high-minded statements several years ago, we're seeing real action to drill down, understand, given that it's such a significant portion of the total workforce, or at least for a lot of enterprises, what's really happening there, and partnering closely with their preferred suppliers to ensure that they're being inclusive, that they're casting a wide net, and that the contingent job descriptions are well crafted, such as to be maximally inclusive and eliminate any unconscious bias. So that measurement, establishing a baseline, both at the hire as well as the submittal, the applicant standpoint for contingent and external roles, is fast becoming a fundamental program yardstick.
And you're using that in your scorecard to drive behavior then as well, right?
Yes, and flowing down to supplier scorecards.
Yeah.
I think it's a very astute observation, Brian. And from a technology perspective, this is the area that we had to chose to put some focus on early in the game. And as you can appreciate, there's a high degree of reticence and anxiety on some suppliers' perspective to put in some of the demographic information. So we decided, look, in our journey, we're creating a talent entity, and we're putting the power in the talent's hands. Now, it's kind of like Bruce said earlier with direct sourcing, built and they will come. I don't necessarily think all of a sudden we're going to wake up one day and have all this information, because I was talking with a diversity supplier who said, look, at the end of the day, if I'm an African-American woman from South Carolina, I don't trust you. I don't trust what you're going to do with that data. So you may give me the opportunity to enter that into Beeline, but I'm not doing it. Right? So there's a behavioral component of this as well. So I think step one is just providing safe access for folks to do that. But then again, we have to help people understand that this is going to be used for good and not for bad. And that'll only happen through proof points. And so I think that's a lot where the MSP and the suppliers are starting to work together much more. Like the technology piece, it's kind of there. We fix that. There's a lot of behavioral work ahead of us. I think we still have to endeavor upon.
Yeah, the communication and change management on that is fundamental. In what way is this being used? It's not about the selection. It's about understanding strategies and their effect in terms of being able to extend opportunities more broadly to the communities that are serviced by the end customers.
Yeah. And I think it's also, this all ties together with the strategic sourcing and working with the right vendors and risk management and stuff like that. I remember seeing a vendor a few years ago that was taking an intake call, and the poor recruiter took notes down exactly what the hiring manager said and put it on the job description. And then it went worldwide, where it said looking to hire somebody Caucasian preferred, and it went on CNN and The Guardian, and like it just is a disaster for both the company and the staffing agency. And so, it was a pure mistake based on somebody's bad choice of words. And so I think this is all important when you're doing this tracking. I also kind of wanted to know about so the Utmost acquisition that you did, Doug, is that also going to be helping with metrics and sort of converging total talent and how we integrate?
Yeah, it definitely is. Thanks for bringing it up, because I was talking with Bruce about this a little bit earlier. I think maybe at large the industry feels like we just tried to take a competitor off the marketplace. But if you go deep on what those folks were doing, you realize there was a lot more to it than just trying to become a VMS. In fact, we're a little bit scared, to be honest, when we got deep and saw what they were doing. Like, wow, that's a lot of where we want to go strategically, and you're going to be able to get there faster. And you've thought about this in a really clever way. I'll just give one example, and that's what we're launching, called Global Workforce Intelligence. It's a little different. They call it something different, but at the end of the day, we now have this ability to consume the data, specifically in the external, but not necessarily. It could be FTEs if it's coming out of Workday as well, and eventually SAP, et cetera. But really trying to get our hands around the entirety of what that workforce looks like. And as I was sharing with Bruce in our conversation, there was this case study where they consumed a competitor's VMS data that only represented 15% of everything else they ingested from an external workforce perspective. So that's probably the area. It's not probably, it is the area I'm most excited about, and we're going to be doing a lot more with that technology as well. But right here, right now, that's a solution that we're ready on basically day one. That, to your point, absolutely addresses managing the visibility of the external workforce.
Amazing.
That's cool.
Yeah. Excited
Yeah, I
about
think
that.
it's extremely fitting, right? Like as we talk about this increased need for visibility and really the holistic workforce, not just contingent, but FTEs, and then all kinds of forms of workers, and to give visibility into that's extremely powerful, and I think is also where we still need to evolve, and then provide the external data coupled with just simply visibility on the workforce. So the so what becomes increasingly important, and how does that then play into the strategy?
Agreed. And that's, in my mind, where TDX is a perfect fit. So you're welcome for that, Jason, but I'm sincere about it.
So Jason, speaking of TDX, like in most recessions, we see salaries starting to compress and rates to go down. But in this situation, given the uniqueness of the quote unquote recession that may come, and if it's rolling, then it's really even more fragmented. Do you see rate compression happening, or do you feel like we're just going down the wrong path if we even try to do that as clients?
It really depends on the market, the role, the geography, the industry, and then sometimes month to month, quarter to quarter, you see these things playing out a little bit differently. On an overall basis, we're not seeing compression, still seeing some growth. But one of the things that I like to do when looking at the market stats, because we have the benefit of seeing all the entities within our indices, is put them in quadrants. We say software developers are still slightly on the rise, and wages are still slightly on the rise. When you put it on quadrants of who's hiring more, who's hiring less, who's paying more, who's paying less, there's a greater than 50% share of those that are hiring more and paying more than previously. And so if you look at who makes that up and in which geographies, and there's still a lot of excitement. The trick is to know what market you're in and how to serve that given customer.
Yeah. So the old days of rate cards that were 5 years old are no longer working.
5 years old, done at a job title level, assuming course regions, because somehow all these 12 locations should all behave the same. Those things are becoming a lot more sophisticated because there's gigantic amount of dollars and pounds and every other currency at stake to get that right. And the piece of it that I think is most relevant to the now is being able to price things at the skill level, not just the title. What is this developer really doing? So we should pay the appropriate amount.
Yeah. So Bruce, are you seeing clients being open to dynamic pricing and dynamic score rate calculations on a quarter by quarter basis or even monthly?
Oh yeah, even monthly in some cases, which gives us more work, but it adds more value. And I think the other element of it is which turns into a bit of a Rubik's Cube, is the talent anywhere. Because now you've got to price the work, not what that person wants and what the market says.
Yeah.
So you're actually pricing the piece of work rather than saying, oh, I need to pay X because that's a software developer and that's how much they want in that market. So, unless you want to list every single city in the US on the job description with different price points against it for your suppliers, you have to price the work, not the worker. Which I think is going to actually expedite the conversation we were talking about earlier in terms of more outcome work.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we really should be doing as an industry. We should be able to tell people this is what it costs to do a Concur to SAP integration.
Yeah.
Not here's how much you should pay for a Java developer for that day.
Or a Beeline to SAP integration, for example.
Yeah,
exactly.
Just saying, right?
I was trying to be vendor neutral.
Theoretically. Touche.
I love that. Well, guys, this was amazing. Any last thoughts before we have Brian close us out with his guitar?
Am I really doing this?
Yes.
Yes.
We're still plugged in. Come on, there's no excuse.
Yes.
Doug, any parting words, or do you want to sing?
No, I don't want to sing. You don't want me to sing. I will sing. I think, look, at the end of the day, I'm incredibly optimistic about that, which we're doing, because when you think about the percentage of labor that's, in our category, the external, it's 45, like call it what you want. And I also think we're on the precipice of a really interesting turning point where the CFO's office may say, gosh, if this economy is going to go down the way it is, I love this variable model. I now understand it's strategic. We've been utilizing it for years. We're increasing. We may see a shift in the mix of business. And I think that bodes really, really well for all of us in this industry.
That's the golden age of Contingent.
Yeah. Just a small town girl. Hit it, Brian.
That's all you're getting.
That's it. That's great, though. Well, thank you, everyone. This is amazing. Any parting words? Anyone else?
Last year, I said the stigma of being a temp or contingent was gone. And I think the fact that we're saying that it's also fluid and mobile, I think that one stayed true. So I'll finish on a win.
That's true. That's great. And I agree with that. And I'm glad that happened.
I'll just close with how much I enjoy this panel and look forward to being a 6-timer on the next one.
Absolutely. We're excited about it. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ash.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.